you had to choose between honor and love, which would you choose? Not the kind of love you find in songs or storybooks, but the kind that creeps into your soul like smoke through a cabin door. The kind you don't ask for. The kind you can't explain. And the kind that could cost you everything. I was raised in the dry heart of the New Mexico territory, where the winds knew your name, and the land bore witness to things no church would dare speak of. Back then, we lived by rules as old and cruel as the land itself. My name's Clara Bell. I was the marshal's daughter, and that meant I belonged to the town long before I belonged to myself. My mother died, bringing me into the world, and folks said she'd passed her strength into me on the way out. My father, Marshal Amos Bell, was a hard man. Not cruel, but the kind whose silence filled rooms like thunderclouds. He loved this town more than he loved me, though he'd never say it plain. He said duty was a man's true religion. I suppose I believed him. For a time. Our town, San Rojo, wasn't more than a handful of wood-scarred buildings pinned against red earth and sky. But to the men who ruled it, it might as well have been Rome. Law came at the barrel of a colt, and mercy was for fools or preachers. And still, there was beauty here. Strange, silent beauty in the spaces between things, the hush before sunrise, the wind brushing through cottonwood leaves like a whisper from a world forgotten. It was under those very cottonwoods where I first saw him. That summer, the air hung thick with dust and questions. Rumors rode in from the east like dying cattle. Talk of missing livestock, frightened ranchers, and shadowy figures moving through the canyons. Apache raids, the men muttered at the saloon. Retaliation, others whispered under breath. But my father didn't deal in whispers, only bulletproof truth. We'll keep our land safe, he said, with or without Washington's help. I knew better than to ask too many questions. It was the end of June when I first went down to the river alone. I told Pa I was gathering herbs for poultices. He nodded without looking up. I walked with a basket and a rifle slung over my shoulder, pretending I belonged to the land the way the cottonwoods did. Tall, quiet, and rooted in something older than laws. That's when I found the blood. It stained the rocks near the bend, not fresh, but not yet dry. And in the thicket beyond, something stirred. I raised my rifle, heart kicking like a mule in my chest. Another rustle. I stepped forward, and then I saw him, half collapsed beneath the largest cottonwood. He looked more spirit than man. Bronze skin darkened by sun and dirt, long hair tangled across his brow, one hand pressed to his ribs. The red there wasn't from the earth. He was bleeding. Badly. I should have turned and run. I should have gone straight to my father. But I didn't. He looked at me. Not like a beast caught in a trap, but like a man who already knew his end had come. His eyes were dark and steady, and though he said nothing, there was something in his gaze that held me there like a nail through wood. I lowered my rifle. He didn't move, not even when I stepped closer and knelt beside him. His breath rattled in his chest. He'd been shot, through and through, but not dead. Not yet. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. He didn't answer. He just stared. I pulled my flask from the basket, pressed it to his lips. He drank like a man who hadn't tasted water in days. Then he looked at me again, slower this time, like he was trying to understand why I hadn't finished him off. "Why are you here?" I asked, though I wasn't sure what answer I wanted. Still no reply. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of everything we didn't yet know about each other. of everything this world would never allow. In that moment, something changed. I didn't know his name, but I knew this. I couldn't leave him there. I tore strips from the lining of my skirt and pressed them against his wound. His jaw clenched, but he didn't cry out. I worked fast, hands trembling but sure. I'd tended animals like this before. This was different. This was a man, not just a man, but the enemy, at least in my father's eyes, and my town's. And still I kept going. By the time I finished binding him, the sky had turned to gold. The cicadas started singing, and the wind picked up, shaking the cottonwoods like they were warning me. I knew I couldn't carry him, not alone, so I did the only thing I could. I whispered, "Stay alive," and I promised I'd return at dawn. Then I walked back to town like I'd done nothing wrong. But my heart was no longer mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the boards creak and the wind hum low outside my window. I thought of his eyes, the wound, the way he drank the water like it was his last chance at life. I thought of my father, and the gallows he'd build if he ever found out. Somewhere between midnight and morning, I realized something that chilled me more than any desert night ever could. I hadn't saved him because he was a man. I hadn't saved him because I was merciful. I had saved him because I already cared. And I didn't even know his name. Would you go back? Would you risk your blood for a stranger? Would you choose love if it meant losing everything else? Because that's where my story begins. And that's where everything I thought I believed began to fall apart. If you had to give up the place you came from, the name your kin spoke, the path your blood had carved for you, just to keep someone safe, would you do it? Would you do it knowing there's no going back? The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the quiet that follows thunder, the kind that knows another storm is coming and may be worse than the first. We kept moving, south, then west, then into the hills that even the traders avoided. Koa said the land there was old, older than borders, older than blood feuds, older than hate. He was right. You could feel it in the stones. In the way the wind didn't howl, it whispered, like it remembered things no one else dared speak. We found a place, high up, nestled between two cliffs, where the sun struck the rocks like fire in the morning, and the shadows kept the days cool. There was water, shelter, enough to live by if we were willing to live small. And we were, because what we had, it didn't need more than that. It just needed space and silence, and the promise that for now we were safe. But even love like ours couldn't hold off the world forever. It was late September when I saw the smoke, thin and gray, curling like a serpent over the ridge. Someone else was out there. Koa saw it too. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. We both knew. The past had caught up. We packed only what we could carry. We left behind the rest, the woven mats, the dried berries, the carved spoons we'd made together. Little things, but they had held our life, our love, our peace. We went back to the river, back to the place it all began, back to the cottonwoods. Some might call it foolish, to return to the place you were nearly found, nearly broken. But sometimes there's nowhere else left. Sometimes full circles find you whether you want them to or not. The river was low now, its current slower, quieter. The leaves above us had turned, golden and brittle, clinging to the branches like last breaths. And under those trees, Koa looked at me like he already knew what I didn't want to say. "We can't run any more," I whispered. He nodded. "No," I swallowed. "If they find us—" "They will," he said. And still, he reached for my hand. I had always thought of love as something fragile, something you had to protect. But in that moment I realized, love like ours didn't need protecting. It was the protection. It was the thing that kept us standing, even when everything else crumbled. We spent that night beneath the stars, no fire between us, only the warmth of our bodies and the memory of everything we'd survived. I remember how he touched my face, not with urgency, but with reverence, like he was memorizing me one last time. Before dawn, we heard the hooves. 4, maybe 5 riders close. Koa stood first. "I'll draw them away," he said. I sat up, heart pounding. "No!" He looked at me with those eyes, steady, calm, final. "They want me, not you." I shook my head. "You're not leaving me." But he already was. Not in body, not yet, but in the way men do when they've already made a choice that cannot be undone. He leaned down, pressed his forehead to mine, and whispered something in his language, soft and slow, like prayer. Then he was gone. I waited in the shadows, every second stretching like years, and then gunshots. 2, then 3, then silence. I ran. Branches tore at my arms. My skirt caught on rocks, but I didn't care. I ran to the sound, to the smell of smoke and blood and endings. I found him by the water's edge, still breathing, barely. One of the riders lay nearby, rifle fallen, blood soaking the earth. The others were gone, scattered, or maybe dead. I didn't look for them. I only looked at him. He smiled. Even then, even there. I held him in my arms, pressed my hands to the wound, but we both knew. There are some things you don't come back from. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He shook his head. "No sorrow," he murmured. "Only love." His hand found mine, gripped it, then loosened. The cottonwoods swayed above us. The river moved on, and Koa, the man I loved, the man the world had called enemy, savage, outlaw, was still. I buried him beneath those trees, with my bare hands, with tears, with everything I had left. No marker, no name, just a piece of my heart returned to the earth. And then I stood, and I walked, back to nothing, back to silence, back to a world that would never know what it had taken from me. But I carried him, in my bones, in my blood, in every step, because when you've loved like that, fully, fiercely, against everything they ever told you was right, you don't stop. You become something else, something wild, something free. If you had to lose everything, your name, your home, your past, just to love someone the world said you shouldn't, would you still choose them, even knowing you'd carry the ache forever? Because I did. And I'd do it again, every single time.